This is AgGrad Live.
We have all of the different segments within the cotton.
The show that explores what it's really like to work in the ag industry.
So making sure that we get policy and regulatory issues
straight from the people who live it every day. Hello, AgGrads. We are back live last week in New Orleans for the NCBA convention. Had a great time back in the office and really excited about today's episode. And before we get into it too deep, our 30 under 30 is closed. We were blown away by the quality and quantity of nominations. As I said last week, I think we had over 200 when all was said and done. Very, very excited. We're going to be unveiling those in the coming months and have some pretty cool things planned that you'll get to see related to the 30 individuals. So excited about that. So I'm not here to plug 30 under 30 for the first time in a long time, but I do want to remind you that if you are looking to either hire or be hired in agriculture, or your company's looking, head over to aggrad.com. That is what we do. Now, today we're going to talk about talking, if that makes sense. We're going to talk about agriculture and articulating your ideas in agriculture. And I'm very, very excited about our guest. Her and I have known each other a long time. We both wore the Blue Jackets in FFA long ago, and she just recently won the Young Farmers and Ranchers discussion meet, which is a truck. So she is the best articulator, if that's a word, of agriculture. Please welcome Jackie Munt. Thank you for being on the show.
I'm really glad to be here, Tim. And that is probably the nicest introduction. Most people are like, she's really good at arguing or discussing.
Well, that's a good distinction too. Good at arguing. And in true agricultural fashion, tell everybody where you're broadcasting from today.
Yeah, so never a dull moment in ag, right? So we are actually coming to you live from the Subway parking lot in Newton, Kansas.
That is awesome. Storm. You can always count on Subway.
Yes. Well, they've got great lighting. They're in the Walmart parking lot. We were aiming for Walmart, but said, ooh, that's a good looking light. So here we are. Nice.
Well, we teased this episode that you won a free truck, which is true. Mm-hmm. A brand new truck as a result of this discussion meet. For somebody who's just never heard of the contest at all, maybe just give us your background, how you heard about it, and what enticed you other than obviously the potential to win a truck.
The discussion meet competition and I have a really long history. In my family, we used to joke about the fact that I come from a long line of discussion meet champions, but it's really true. I've actually been competing in the contest since I was a sophomore in high school, so it's been close to 20 years. And that seems like a crazy thing for me because most people don't, compete even in sports for 20 years. But I did start out in the high school competition. Wisconsin has, which is where I'm from originally, has a high school competition. And I was fortunate to win that my senior year at the state level. There is no national competition for high school. So I kind of put it on the back burner and went and did the college thing. And in college, was reintroduced to the discussion meet as part of the Collegiate Farm Bureau program at Fresno State, which is where I did my undergraduate work in Fresno, California. And so, again, competed in it several years there and was fortunate to win the California competition and represent them at the American Farm Bureau Federation's collegiate competition. And that year it happened to be in Sacramento, California. And then, again, when I graduated from college, kind of got some advice from both my sister and her husband who had competed on the national level. And by the way, my sister also won the national contest. So there was kind of a lot of lead up to this. And that's what I mean by I come from a long line of champions, is that she won. And so that was like the expectation. I need to do that. And so kind of forgot about it for a while. But for the Young Farmer and Rancher discussion meet, you do age out at 35. And I'm approaching that age in the next couple of years. And so this year said, you know what, I'm going to jump back in and give it a shot, and won both the Kansas competition as well as advanced all the way to the finals of the national contest. So it's something that I've been developing the skills for the last 20 years. And it's a competition that I've coached on and off throughout that time and really enjoy getting people involved in because it's the type of skills that you will use literally every day, no matter what your career is. It's the ability to have a conversation, to understand the background of an issue, develop an opinion, and then, like you said, to be able to articulate that opinion and have that conversation be a part of how do we move the issue forward and how do we contribute. So it doesn't matter what your job is, you should be having those types of conversations.
Very cool. And we're going to get as much of Jackie as possible because I came down with something this week. So you'll see, like, I'm sweating. I've got my tea here. I'm hanging in there, but I'll tell you, it's been a little bit of a rough week here. So we're going to get plenty of Jackie in. But tell us just, I mean, on a real practical level, what's the structure look like? So you enter a room and you talk and people score how well you talk, or, like, what's the structure of the competition?
Discussion Meet is a simulation of a committee meeting. And some people will also say you're looking at it like if you were walking into the boardroom or to a hearing somewhere. They're giving you a big picture issue. And so every year, the American Farm Bureau will come out with like 5 big picture topics related to agriculture. So this year, the types of topics they had were, how can we attract people who are interested in STEM education to become a part of agriculture? Another topic that they were talking about is, how can Farm Bureau help to protect farmers and ranchers' access to technology? So they're not questions that have simple answers, but they are questions that are going to make you dig deeper and really think about not only how can Farm Bureau be involved, but how can I as an individual get involved, and why do my opinions on this matter to advancing the industry? So they give you that big picture topic, and like I said, it's a simulation of a committee. So there's 3 portions of the competition. There's an opening statement. You'll be in a group of 4 to 6 people. Typically they try to get as close to 4 people as possible because they want to give you lots of time to get your opinions out. And so each one of those 4 people has an opportunity to stand up and give 30 seconds of what their initial impression of the topic is, why they think it's important, maybe to tell a story or, make some kind of a connection with why this issue is important. After that opening statement, the second portion of the competition is basically an open panel conversation. So there is a moderator, but the moderator really only steps into the competition if they're absolutely needed. So if somebody gets way off topic, or someone says something, really rude, or starts fighting, that's not actually, we joked about it being a debate. It's not meant to be a debate. It's meant to be a productive conversation. And so hopefully the 4 or 6 people in the conversation will lead the conversation and really get in depth during that open discussion time. And so they typically will have anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to be able to really develop those ideas and talk through not only what is the problem that you're addressing, but then also how can we come up with solutions and how can we move forward. After that open discussion ends, the final portion of the competition is just an opportunity to kind of wrap up the conversation with a closing statement. So everyone gets a minute to collect their thoughts and then a minute to present kind of a recap, or maybe what the next steps they think are for where the conversation or what those outcomes from the conversation really are. So it's pretty simple, opening, closing with open discussion in the middle. But really what you're being judged on during that competition is, in a little part, your ability to present ideas and to speak. But more than that, you're really being asked to evaluate ideas. And so do you understand the problem and the background and have the ability to analyze that problem? And then do you come up with solutions and next steps? Are you cooperative? Are you the type of person that you actually would want to have on a committee or board? Are you helpful? Do you move the conversation forward? And so that's really what you're being judged on during the competition.
And just to bring some some realness to the structure there, what was one of the topics for the finals that you found particularly interesting?
So of the 5 topics that they put out actually at the national competition, if you make it to the final 4, you get to talk about 4 of the 5 topics. And so I mentioned 2 of them already. The other 2 topics that we discussed, one of them that I was really passionate about was, are we being inclusive of all types of production and all types of producers within agriculture, and Farm Bureau specifically? Like, can we be more inclusive? And that one was really interesting because it parallels a lot of the conversations that we're having on the national scene just about diversity and why diversity is important. Like I said, whether it's the cultural practices that you're talking about or whether it's the people who are involved in agriculture. And so that was really, it challenged me as an individual, because I typically, though I'm very interested in politics and very informed, I don't take a stand on a lot of things. And it really challenged me as I was having conversations and researching to really form, not only, it wasn't forming my opinion, I knew what my opinion was, but to really kind of realize that I have a responsibility as a a person who wants to be a leader and wants to be an influencer in agriculture to really actually be able to articulate that point and say, you know what, we're not doing a great job of being inclusive of everyone in agriculture, and here's the things we need to do. And it can be a hard conversation to have. So that was one of the topics that I really enjoyed getting involved in. And then the topic that we faced in the final round was really a very difficult topic to address. And it's one that I think every farmer, rancher, agribusiness person faces every day. And it was, I'm not going to get this 100% right, but it was basically, how do we do a better job of understanding market trends to be able to then create responsive business plans and bring added value and profits to our operations? And I think at the end of the day, that's the question that every business person should be asking themselves is, how do I make sure that I understand what the market needs and then fill that need in a way that's going to allow me to be profitable? And that was a really difficult question to kind of dig into. What am I doing? What are other people that I see in agriculture doing? And how do we equip people to have the tools that they need to be successful?
Cool. And does everyone have to be a farmer or rancher to participate? I know it's through the young farmers and ranchers, but what's the qualification? Because I know there's a lot of people passionate about agriculture that may not be full-time farmers or ranchers.
So the competitors on the national level were a pretty broad mix of people because every state is allowed to set their own membership requirements. So in most states, you do have to be a voting member, but that can vary vastly depending on the state's individual rules. So Farm Bureau, one of the cool things about it as an organization is it's actually like a federated organization. So like each state is a member of the national organization, and then each county is a member of the state organization. And so there's a lot of local freedom, and they're passionate about being a grassroots organization. And I think that's really cool because it gives you that freedom. So on the national level, you really did see diversity. There were folks who were either like lawyers or in law school. You saw folks who were high school ag teachers or maybe extension agents. You had people who were working in industry, like myself. You know, I do have a day job where I work for a regional cooperative in our area, and then you had people who were actual, production agriculturalists. That was their full-time job, and so you see a variety of people who are involved in this, all passionate about agriculture. But I think you see some diversity in who's going to be involved, and that's what's great about this contest is, again, every single one of those professions, you need to be able to articulate your ideas about what's going on.
Cool. So I think there's a lot of people, whether they're going to do this contest or not, but they would like to get themselves better at talking about agriculture. And so I think maybe looking at how you prepared for this competition would be really interesting, even for those of us, I'm 37. I'm never going to do the contest. I'm too old. But for all of us that want to get better about talking about agriculture, I bet the process you went through to prepare is probably useful for all of us. And I think that's one thing that's difficult for me is sort of where do you do the research? How do you make sure that you get, a good balance of different opinions, and what's the best use of your time as far as preparing to talk about the agriculture industry? So I'm curious, what was your process?
I think when you look at this, you have to break it into two parts. And one is the ability to have the conversation. It comes into that speaking component, but it's also your people skills, your ability to get your point across. That's one type of preparation, building those skills. And then there's the content, the knowledge, the background. You're kind of preparing in two different ways. And I will say, got a little bit of an advantage because I have been doing the contest for so long. Mm-hmm. And I learned some really valuable lessons throughout my life. I remember as probably a junior in high school, competing one time, and when you go into a room and you speak about different topics, you want to be seen as being knowledgeable. But I remember I competed against this gal who, she was just like a fact machine gun. Like every time she opened her mouth, she gave like 50 different facts. And that had a really lasting impact on me because I realized that like facts are really great if they can help you to illuminate your point. But if you just spit one fact after another just so that people know that you're smart, like your message is not going to be really well received. And so, I really try hard when I speak to make sure that I'm telling a story and connecting with people, that when I open my mouth, I have something that's very relevant and on topic to say. But then I'm also following it up with, why does this matter? How does this connect? What's the next solution? Where are we going from here? And so for me, that process has been a really long process of just how do you be effective as a communicator? And I've learned some of that in the discussion meet and some of that just in everyday life practice. And I think my advice for people would be really be open to constructive feedback and seek it out, right? Like I'm constantly asking people, is there a way that I can be better? What are your opinions about how that went? And just kind of trial and error and pay attention to the people around you and what works and what doesn't work. Because that's something that we're constantly evolving in and hopefully can move ourselves forward from that perspective. And so a lot of people that want to get into this competition, the thing that they say is, well, I would love to do this, but I get too upset and I'm too aggressive and I argue too much, which is real. You know what? I see that in my college students and I love that passion. And I always challenge them to say, okay, that's fantastic. And I don't want you to lose that passion, but take the step back and think about if you were the person on the other side of the table and you had that much passion coming at you, like, how would that feel? And so we have a lot of those conversations that, like, if you can curve that and still infuse that, but not attack the people that you're having the conversation with, like, make this for the sake that, like, it's okay to disagree. Like you can say to someone during a conversation, that's a really interesting point. I'm going to disagree with you and here's why. That comes across so much better than you're wrong. That's the worst thing I've ever heard. It's right. It's a totally different thing. So just constantly kind of evolving and getting better at your ability to have the conversation with people. So that's one side of the competition. Is it really does take some finesse and some leadership and some ability to be able to say, I'm gonna dive into a difficult subject here. I'm gonna disagree with you. I'm gonna bring up a point that we haven't talked about, and to do that in a way that people are willing to receive it.
Two questions on that real quick. Okay. One is, so I watched actually your final competition because they broadcast on Facebook Live, and I watched part of it. I think I watched all of it. I watched most of it for sure. And I thought you were doing a good job, but I was curious, like, do you know, how do you know if you're doing a good job? That's maybe a stupid question, but like, I was like, yeah, I mean, you sounded real good, but how do you, like, when you're in the contest, do you know, like, okay, I think I'm up there. I think I'm doing pretty well. Or is it kind of like with me, if I'm in a conversation and we're talking about something I know we disagree on, I'm kind of like, I never know if I really get through to that person or not, And so how do you sort of evaluate that in real time?
So that's a really high level question, because you're right. When I am in competition mode, and I do equate this to a little bit like being a performance athlete. Like people talk all the time about, these people who train for marathons or, they're on this like state or national winning, basketball team, right? I treated this and in my preparation, and that's one of the things that we'll get to here in a minute, is like, in the months leading up to this competition, I was like a performance athlete, and we joked about it all the time at our house and with the people that I work with, but like, gotta go to bed early tonight, I'm training. But like, you follow the same type of regiment, and you really have to be disciplined about it, just like a performance athlete would. And at the end of the day, like, this sounds really weird saying it, but I did win a national championship.
Right.
And that's the caliber of competition that I was playing at. And so when I was going into the competition, I knew what I needed to do. I understood the rubric, I had the experience, and I had a great team working with me. So I really knew, if I go into this room and I can hit these points that I need to hit, and if every time I open my mouth, I'm providing some type of content that has not yet been touched on, that is super relevant to what we're talking about, and I tell a great story and I connect with it, and then I make sure that I have a solid, tangible solution that we can move forward with. If I do that every time I open my mouth, that is the expectation that I need to hit. I'm almost competing against myself, right? Like, if I do those things, I know that I'm doing well. When you talk, though, about like evaluating the other people, my job is to listen, or for me at least, because this builds into my skill set and my strategy. My job was to listen to them and to be able to make sure that when I spoke, I wasn't just being that person who was waiting for the next turn to talk, that I was actually listening to what they were saying, and that I was that I was able to take that and connect it to a point that I wanted to make and build that bridge. And so I was so focused on doing those two things that even though I heard and was analyzing the things they were saying, I really don't, stepping out of that room, have an ability to evaluate anyone else other than myself. And that's where my team comes in. So I had a great support team, Mark, my significant other, and then our state coordinator, her name is Edie, and she's fantastic. And they were really there in my corner, and they were helping me by evaluating what people were doing and giving me feedback when we stepped out of the room. But for the most part, like I said, I was competing against myself. I knew what I needed to go. I went in, I made a solid performance, and that was what I was evaluating myself on when I walked out of the room.
Do they have the discussion meet competition at a local level, or is it only state and national?
So depending on the state, they do. In my home state of Wisconsin, they actually have district competition. So you have to qualify at a district competition to then go on to the state contest, and their state contest is bigger. Here in Kansas, we don't have enough participation, and so we do have just the state competition. I think it just kind of depends on where you're at, how many people are participating in the contest, and so it's going to be on a state by state basis. But a lot of states have started having high school FFA competitions, and the questions are more FFA related, more ag education, but again, really kind of I think a great building block and a great starting point for this.
But you don't know what they're going to ask you to talk about until like you're seated there and the competition started, right?
So typically you'll everyone knows the topics ahead of time. So like they'll announce next year's topics in like March or April of this year. So you can study all 5 topics.
Okay.
And you typically will know, like at the end of orientation, they'll tell you what the round 1 topic is. So you have maybe an hour to prepare for that. And then at the end of a round of competition, or when they announce who's moving on to that round, they'll say, okay, the next round is going to be this. So you do have, maybe an hour or two, depending on how the competition is set up, or, as we got into the further rounds, you might have an overnight to prepare for it, but you couldn't do the amount of prep work needed. And if you want, I can get into that, the amount of prep work needed in an overnight or an hour to be able to be ready for these topics. Like, you know what the topic is going to be, but you have to be prepared for all of them ahead of time.
Gotcha. Okay. And tell us more about prep. I mean, do you
okay.
do you go to like online sources? Well, give us the tactics we need to get better at this stuff.
So you really have to become a student of all of the topics, and everybody's going to have their own ideas and ways for this. But for me, I'm a social person. I love having a conversation. In fact, when I think about like in college, like the most effective studying I ever did was like working in a study group, teaching somebody else how to do things. When I'm workshopping ideas, talking through them, working in a group, that's when I come up with my best work. So I knew going into this that like if I wanted to be successful and I wanted to really understand issues, it was going to be a lot of meeting with experts, a lot of conversations with people. So our state coordinator basically set up about 1 or 2 meetings a week where I was spending time with experts on the different topics, really kind of getting the background, and I was reading articles and looking for information, but really kind of having those in-depth background conversations about what is the reason for this even being an issue, what are we talking about here, making sure that I understand it. I remember at one point, somebody brought up blockchain technology, and that's really popular now. And I just kind of did all right, everybody talks about it, and I, in a way, think I understand it, but I really don't feel comfortable like throwing blockchain out because I don't understand what it is. So they found me an expert who basically spent an hour with me, just giving me like here's the dummy's guide to what blockchain is and how it works. And that conversation was a building block for so many solutions that I brought into the equation because I really felt like I understood it. I didn't necessarily talk constantly about blockchain, but anytime that I spoke about it, again, I had that background knowledge. Kind of having the context behind it for me and my strategy was really important. And as the competition approached, one of the things that was important for me, like I said, those conversations, a lot of people who maybe haven't had the experience would get something out of having practice sessions and kind of continuing to practice the topics. But for me, it was more impactful to be able to have a conversation. And so I know, Tim, you were someone who I had reached out to. when there were people who were experts in these areas that I had met at different points in my life, I basically just reached out to them and said, hey, I would love to spend 30 minutes or an hour, depending on who it was. Could you visit with me about these topics? And I'd go in and share the topics with them, but also have one or two questions based on what their expertise was. And really, that became my practice, was just having conversations, because every time that I was having those conversations, if they brought something up that triggered, a memory or a thought, I could go and do research. I could call another person. And so it was building my base of stories and experiences. And that's really how I studied, like I said, that kind of workshopping out loud. And it challenged my thought process. It allowed me to ask questions. And it really allowed me to become basically an expert, if you will, in the topics. And so I got to the point where, going from maybe once or twice a week talking about these topics 3 or 4 months out to, in the month leading up to the competition, I was having at least one meaningful conversation a day about one, if not more, topic. And that was just, again, being comfortable talking through the issues, having ideas, workshopping them. And that's really kind of how I prepped until you got to the competition. And then I kind of switched to the competition mode. So take all of the information I know in my mind, and then here's the points that I think are the most effective. Here's solutions that I've thought through based on conversations. And when I walk into the room, I've basically got, a 1-page, if you will, like tactical or strategy summary of what I'm going to do when I walk into that room.
Very cool. So when you're doing the discussion part, I know you said you have 1 minute for comments, opening comments, and
30
closing?
seconds, and then a 1 minute closing. Yep.
And then what about during the discussion? Do they cut you off after a certain point?
No. So the 25 minutes of open discussion, or it can be, I guess at some levels it's 20 and some levels it's 30. It just depends on the level of competition. Anyone can talk for any amount of time, and there is no hard and fast science to it. But at the adult national level competition, Mark was actually my statistician, is what we called it. We joked about it, but he kept track. And what was really interesting was that every person at the adult level of competition spoke for about a minute at a time. And so during that time, depending on how many people were in the round and how long the round was, you really only got to speak 4 to 5 times during most rounds, which, when you hear 25 or 30 minutes, that sounds like such a long time, but you were speaking with other people who also bring a lot of value to the table, and to articulate complex points, it takes a while. And so I'm obviously a talker. So for me, the challenge was I need to get in, make my point, and get out, because that will take me about a minute to do that. Because you don't want to be the person who talks on for 2 or 3 minutes, because nobody's going to cut you off, but the audience feels it. And you also don't want to be the person who opens their mouth and says something but doesn't make a complete point. So I really, there was a little bit of, kind of math and science that goes into that we kind of were perfecting that formula. My first round did not go well. And we kind of went back to the drawing board and said, okay, remember, and I knew this stuff going in, but I'm going to only be able to speak 4 or 5 times. What are the 6 things that are most important for me to say? Because I might not get to say every one of them, but I should be prepared. Right. And so it was kind of a process to develop that. And it's open. You can take the conversation wherever you want it to, but the really skillful person is going to recognize when they need to stop talking and when they need to involve others in the conversation.
And so the strategy of talking the entire 30 minutes so that nobody else gets a chance is not a wise one, you're saying?
It's not very cooperative, right? And remember, that's
it's not very cooperative. That's right.
That's one of the things that you're judged on. In fact, a lot of people will come in and they'll say oh, I'm gonna ask really tough questions of this person and make them look bad. It makes
can you single out someone else and say, Jackie,
absolutely.
What are you going to do about this?
And there are people who absolutely do that. So one of the folks that I prepared with, he told me that when he was in the Sweet 16 competition, he was up against a lobbyist or a law student maybe. And they said, being that you made it to this round of the competition, you obviously should be familiar with this court case. And they named some court case. And he said, it actually ended up hurting us both, because I had to say, no, I don't think that at this level of competition that it's an expectation that you know about every, and that was a valid point on his side of things, but it really hurt them both, because he looked like he was kind of having to like be aggressive and come back and say like, that's an unfair expectation, but it hurt the person who was trying to single him out. So there is some strategy involved there. Not everyone comes in and is happy-go-lucky, but I've found over the years that, again, when you think about the people you want to be around, there's no reason for me to be aggressive or mean or try to put anyone down. If I put everyone else at the table up and try to make them look their best, it's only going to force me to do a better job. And it, at the end of the day, will move the conversation along much more than if I tried to make them look bad.
Sure. Jackie, this is awesome. Congrats on your success, your championship, your brand new pickup. I would love in the future if somebody in the ag grad community were to continue to win this year after year. So if anybody is watching this or listening, because it will become a podcast as well, and they would love to reach out to you for some coaching and research, what's a good way to tell them to do that?
Fantastic. I cannot tell people enough that is one of the things. When people offer to help, they mean it. Please reach out to me. So I am one of those people who has like no privacy settings on Facebook. So I am on Facebook. My name is Jackie Mundt, and the last name is Mundt. So you can find me on Facebook, but you're also welcome to email me. So my email address is just jackiemunt@gmail.com. Would be glad to answer questions or visit with folks because I really do think that we're all in the same boat together, and I'm so glad to offer my thoughts to anyone who would be interested.
Cool. And that's Jackie Mundt, all one word, right?
Yeah.
I think I got it right. Do you see it on the screen there?
It was right on the screen. Absolutely.
That's great. I'm getting better at not misspelling stuff on the screen. So thank you. For those of you watching on Facebook, you can also catch all of these episodes on YouTube and as a podcast called Ag Grad Live. Thank you for those of you who joined us live, and thank you to Jackie. Congratulations, and make sure you post a picture in the comments of your new truck when you get it.
Absolutely. It might be a while, but we will definitely put that up there.
Cool. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you for joining AgGrad Live. Visit aggrad.com, that's AGGRAD, to join the community, create your profile, and learn more about careers in the agriculture industry.